Chapter 29. The soldier came inside and shut the door and leaned against it. Peter looked hard at him. He could see so little from the streak of light from the window, but there was something familiar. The soldier was John Lassick, the Pole. But no, that couldn't be. John was on Uncle Victor's boat in the Snake. Peter had seen him there that day. Shh! John put his fingers to his lips. From his tunic pocket, he dug a scrap of paper. It was so dark, Peter had to go over and over it before he could make it out. It was a note from Uncle Victor. Peter read, John Lassick is risking his liberty and perhaps his life for you. Follow him at all costs, wherever he goes. On that depends your safety and his. There was no signature, but Peter knew well his uncle's bold handwriting. He nodded to show he understood. Jan kept listening for a sound. What was he waiting for? Peter dared not ask. From afar, Peter could make out a kind of din, a rattle like knives and forks, pans and mugs. When the rattle became much louder, Jean seemed satisfied. He looked out the door. He stepped outside and closed it. When he came back into the cell, there was a high excitement in his whisper. Come now, he said. Quickly. They were out in the hall. Jan stopped to turn the key in the lock outside the door where Peter had been kept prisoner. Into his pocket went the key. And now Peter heard the tramp, tramp, tramp of boots. It came from a distant end of the barracks, but it grew noisier with each step. We'll have to run, Jan whispered. All the time, the sound of the marching soldiers came closer. They seemed to be coming down a hall that would meet the corridor at right angles, and now Peter could hear nothing because of sound in his ears. He wanted to run in the opposite direction. Why go this way, he wondered. We'll only run into them. The marching men must be nearing the corner, but Jean only kept going faster toward them. Uncle Victor said he was to follow Jean at all costs, so behind him ran the breathless, frightened Peter. And now, on the right, Peter saw a door. Through it, Jean pulled him. There was just time to close it softly. The Germans were turning the corner, as Peter could tell by the sound of their steps on the other side of the door. Peter fell into the wet snow of the beach. They were outside the barracks and, for the moment, safe. Jean flattened himself against the wall of the building, and Peter stood up beside him. The shadow of the barracks hid them. The rain was loud on the crusted snow. We're lucky the sentry was going up the beach, not down, Jean whispered. Otherwise, he'd have seen the light when we opened the door. Peter felt a throbbing in his ears. He tried not to pant, but his breath was loud. Now there was another soft pod, pod, pod. More marching. Against the snow they could see a dark figure. It was the sentry returning. He walked up to a point on the line with the door, the very door over which he stood guard. He was not 10 feet away from where Jean and Peter were flattened against the wall. Slap, slap, slap. His heavy leather mittens thumped his shoulders. He changed his rifle from one side to the other and changed it back again. Then he turned and began goose-stepping back in the direction he had come. Jean tugged Peter's sleeve. It was now or never, he seemed to say. Peter was not prepared for what happened next. Jean led him down the beach to the very edge of the ford and then right into the water itself. The cold water bit his body. The breath left him. He didn't think he could stand another minute of it. He wanted to run back to the beach, but Jean kept wading out, and Peter, remembering the warning in the note, found himself following him. It seemed forever, these few minutes they waited in the water, and now Jean was swimming, and Peter found himself doing the same. But you couldn't swim in that close to frozen water. You had no strength. Peter felt the breath going out of him, but somehow or other it seemed better to freeze to death out here than to stay in those barracks and wait for no one knew what. Then there was a numbness over him. He closed his eyes. He must be dreaming, for nothing like this could happen in real life. A hand reached out and grabbed his arm, and he was pulled into a boat. Someone put a flask to his mouth and told him to drink, but the fiery stuff made him sputter, and it ran over his chin. A heavy coat was put over him, and a pair of arms were cradling him. Rolls, Uncle Victor's mate, was holding him. There was another sodden mass on the bottom of the boat. It was Jean Lassick. Peter heard them say his name, but now he found he was beyond caring about anything. The boat, he knew, was the Kling Pearson's lifeboat. Strong arms were pulling it toward the fishing smack.